You paid $12 for that bottle of tire shine sitting in your garage, maybe 15, maybe you upgraded to the fancy gel and dropped 22 on it last month. And 2 weeks later, your tires are brown again, faded, cracking at the edges, slinging black streaks up the side of your quarter panels every time you take the on-ramp too fast. Stop. There is a 4-ingredient formula sitting in a leather-bound workshop ledger from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and it costs about $1 per tire to make. It does not sling. It does not fade in 2 weeks. It makes the rubber blacker than anything on the shelf at the auto parts store, and it actually conditions the sidewall instead of drying it out. The Amish have been using variations of this mix on buggy wheels and farm equipment rubber for close to 100 years. The knowledge never left Holmes County, Ohio, or the back roads of Lancaster. It just never made it into any bottle you can buy. The first time I watched an old man named Amos work this stuff into a set of rubber tires behind a workshop near Millersburg, I honestly thought he was pulling my leg. He had a mason jar, a rag torn from an old flour sack, and a smile like he knew something the rest of us had been paying to not know for 40 years. Stay with me for the next few minutes. I am going to give you the exact ingredients, the exact ratios, the exact application method with no sling, and at the end I am going to hand you the one obscure edition from a 1954 harness maker's notebook that most detailers on YouTube have never even heard of. This works on your daily driver sitting in the driveway right now. You do not need a new car. You do not need a professional garage. You need a rag, a jar, and about 10 minutes on a Saturday morning. Because once you see how simple this is, you are going to be furious that nobody told you sooner. Let me take you back to that workshop. Amos was 73 years old. His beard reached the middle button on his shirt. He kept his tools on wooden pegs on the wall, and every single one of them was older than my truck. He had a Ford pickup out back that his English driver used to haul him into town, and the tires on that truck were the blackest, deepest, richest black I had ever seen on a set of tires. No shine like plastic. No wet, greasy look. Just a deep, saturated, healthy black the way rubber is supposed to look when it comes out of the mold at the factory. I asked him what he used. He walked me over to a shelf and pulled down a mason jar with a hand-labeled paper wrapper. The label was written in pencil, in that careful Pennsylvania Dutch handwriting, and it said only 3 words and a date. The date was 1954. The 3 words I will get to in a minute, because that is the piece most people never hear. Now here is what almost nobody in the detailing world will tell you. The tire shine industry in the United States is estimated at roughly $600 million a year. $600 million, and the actual cost of the ingredients in a $12 bottle of the leading brand is somewhere between 11 and 18 cents. The rest is bottle, label, marketing, distribution, and the retailer markup. You are not paying for a product. You are paying for packaging and shelf space. The Amish never played that game. They could not. When you live on a household income of maybe $25,000 a year and you are raising 7 or 8 children, you do not drive to town to buy a bottle of anything you can mix yourself for pennies. So the community developed formulas, real ones that had to work the first time because there was no return policy and no second trip. The base of the mix Amos handed me that afternoon was glycerin. Plain, cheap, food-grade vegetable glycerin. You can buy a 16-ounce bottle at any pharmacy or online for about $4 to $6, and one bottle will treat a set of tires probably 20 times over. That works out to roughly 25 cents per tire per application, not per bottle, per application. Glycerin does something no petroleum-based tire shine can do. It is what chemists call a humectant. It pulls moisture into the rubber and holds it there instead of stripping it out. Every silicone-based tire shine you have ever used works by coating the surface with a slick film that reflects light. That film dries out, it cracks, and underneath, your rubber is getting drier and drier every single time you apply it. That is why old tires look gray and chalky. That is not just age, that is chemical damage from the very products marketed to make them look new. Glycerin does the opposite. It penetrates, it conditions, it keeps the rubber supple the way the manufacturer intended. But glycerin alone is not the whole formula. Glycerin alone would give you a nice matte black finish, and it would last a few weeks. and it would be a huge improvement over what you have been using. But that is not what Amos handed me. What he handed me had 3 other ingredients, and each one of them does a specific job. The second ingredient is castor oil. Cold-pressed castor oil, the kind your grandmother probably kept in the medicine cabinet. About 1 part castor oil to every 3 parts glycerin. Castor oil is heavier. It fills the microscopic pores in the rubber surface and creates that deep saturated look that no water-based product can match. A 4-ounce bottle costs about $3 and will last you a full year of monthly applications. The third ingredient is what surprised me the most: distilled water. Just plain distilled water, not tap. About 1 part water to every 2 parts glycerin. The water thins the mixture just enough that it spreads evenly and does not leave streaks or blotches. Tap water has minerals that will leave white spots on your rubber as they dry. Distilled water leaves nothing behind but the good stuff. Now here is the moment I want you to pay attention to, because this is where the Amish formula splits away from every homemade recipe you have ever seen online. Every DIY blog will tell you to add lemon oil or dish soap or borax. That is not what Amos did. That is not what was written on that mason jar from 1954. The fourth ingredient was something else entirely, and the reason it matters is because it is the single piece that stops the sling. But before I tell you what it is, you need to understand why the industry actively does not want you to know this. Because if you already own a home, if you already own a truck, if you already have a garage, this is exactly the moment somebody figured out how to sell you the same thing over and over again for the rest of your life. Let me back up. Sling is the black spray that comes off your tires and streaks up the side of your car after you apply tire shine. Every detailer online will tell you that Sling is caused by applying too much product or not letting it dry long enough. That is technically true, but it is not the whole truth. The real reason commercial tire shine slings is because it sits on top of the rubber instead of soaking in. It never actually bonds to the tire. It just clings to the surface, and centrifugal force at highway speeds throws it right off, usually onto your paint, where the silicone can cause staining if you leave it long enough. The Amish formula does not sling because it soaks in. That is the entire trick. It penetrates the rubber the way water penetrates a sponge, and once it is in there, it does not come back out at 70 miles an hour on the interstate. The manufacturers know this. They have known it for decades. The chemistry is not a secret, but a product that soaks in and lasts 3 months is a product you buy 4 times a year. A product that sits on the surface and washes off in the rain is a product you buy every 2 weeks. Do the math on which one their shareholders prefer. Now think about how much money you have spent on tire shine in the last 10 years. If you have been buying a $12 bottle every month, that is $144 a year. Over 10 years, that is $1,400 for rubber conditioner. $1,400 to keep 4 pieces of rubber looking black. And the Amish version, the one I am walking you through right now, costs you about $12 to $15 total in ingredients and lasts you an entire year of monthly applications. There is a document I want to mention. It is not famous. Most people have never heard of it. It is called the Ohio Amish Directory, and specific volumes of it going back to the 1970s contain community records including trade formulas that were shared among carriage makers and harness makers. The rubber and leather preservation formulas from Holmes County were shared informally in workshop ledgers and family notebooks for at least 3 generations before any of it made its way into English hands. The reason it was preserved matters. Amish buggies use solid rubber tires or rubber-covered wheels, and those tires have to last. A new buggy tire is not a 5-minute stop at the tire shop. It is a special order from a specialty manufacturer, and the community depends on making rubber last as long as physically possible. So they figured out preservation techniques that go far beyond anything the automotive detailing industry has bothered to develop, because the automotive industry benefits from your rubber wearing out. An Amish buggy wheel treated properly will last 20 to 30 years. Your car tires are expected to last 4 to 6. Now, if you already own a house and a vehicle and you are thinking this only applies to people with new cars or professional garages, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need a special garage. You do not need a lift. You do not need a pressure washer. You need 3 things you probably already own or can pick up at any drugstore for under $15 total. First, a clean bucket. Any bucket. A 5-gallon paint bucket from your basement is fine. Rinse it out. That is it. Second, an old cotton rag. Not microfiber, not a fancy applicator pad. An old cotton t-shirt torn into squares works better than anything you can buy at the detailing store because cotton absorbs the mixture and releases it slowly onto the rubber. Synthetic fabrics either soak too much or repel the product entirely. This is one of those places where old-fashioned beats modern every single time. Third, a mason jar or any glass container with a tight lid to store the mixture between uses. Glass, not plastic. Plastic will react slightly with the castor oil over time and change the consistency. A quart mason jar costs about $1 at any hardware store and will last the rest of your life. Here is the exact recipe. Write this down or pause the video and screenshot it. Half a cup of food-grade vegetable glycerin, a quarter cup of cold-pressed castor oil, a quarter cup of distilled water. Shake it together in the mason jar until it looks like weak coffee with cream, that pale tan, slightly cloudy color. That is your base. The application on an existing home garage floor with an existing vehicle is dead simple. First, clean the tires. This part matters. You cannot apply this mix over dirty rubber and expect it to bond. Take a stiff brush and warm soapy water, regular dish soap is fine, and scrub each tire until the water running off is clear. If your tires have that grayish-brown film that faded rubber gets, scrub harder. That film is oxidized rubber and old tire shine residue, and you have to get it off before the new mixture can penetrate. Let the tires dry completely. 10 minutes in the sun is enough. 15 minutes in the shade. Now take your cotton rag and dip one corner into the mason jar. Squeeze out the excess. You want the rag damp, not dripping. Apply the mixture to the sidewall in slow circular motions, working from the top of the tire down to where it meets the ground. Cover every square inch of visible rubber. This should take you about 2 minutes per tire. Then walk away for 15 minutes. That is the step everyone skips, and it is the single most important step in the whole process. The mixture needs time to penetrate. If you wipe it down right away, you are wiping off product that has not yet soaked in. If you drive on it immediately, you are creating exactly the sling problem you are trying to avoid. After 15 minutes, take a second clean dry cotton rag and lightly buff each tire, not aggressive, just a soft wipe. This removes any surface excess and leaves behind the deep saturated black finish sitting inside the rubber where it belongs. You are done. That is the whole process. The first application will give you a solid, deep satin black finish that looks the way tires look on a brand new car in the showroom. The second application, done about a week later, will drive the mixture deeper and give you that rich, saturated look that lasts. After the first 2 applications, once a month is plenty. I have been doing this on my own truck for going on 3 years now. My tires look better today than they did when I bought them. But I promised you something at the beginning. I promised you the 4th ingredient, the one from the 1954 mason jar, the one Amos would not put in front of a stranger the first time we met, and only added the second time I came back to that workshop. That is what I want to give you now, because this is the piece that separates a good homemade tire shine from something that genuinely outperforms every bottle on the shelf. The 4th ingredient is beeswax. Specifically, a small amount of pure, unrefined beeswax melted into the mixture while the mixture is warm. About 1 tablespoon of shaved beeswax per cup of the base formula. Here is why this matters, and here is where the harness maker's notebook comes in. There was a harness maker in Lancaster County named Jonas Stoltzfus. He worked from roughly 1938 until his death in 1971. His workshop passed to his son, and eventually the ledgers passed through several hands until portions of them were transcribed and shared informally among Amish craftsmen across Pennsylvania and Ohio. One of those ledgers contained his formula for preserving carriage, leather, and rubber, and that formula included beeswax as a sealant. Beeswax does something the other ingredients cannot do on their own. Once the glycerin and castor oil have penetrated the rubber, the beeswax forms a microscopic protective layer on the surface. Not a thick coating like a silicone tire shine. A very thin, breathable, water-resistant seal that locks the conditioning agents inside the rubber and keeps them from washing out in the rain. This is why the Amish formula lasts for weeks instead of days. This is why it does not turn brown at the first car wash. To add the beeswax, you have to warm the base mixture gently, not on a stove. Set the mason jar in a bowl of hot tap water for about 10 minutes until the liquid inside is warm to the touch. Then drop in about 1 tablespoon of shaved beeswax per cup of mixture, seal the lid, and shake vigorously for 2 minutes. The beeswax will melt into the mixture and stay suspended when it cools, giving you a slightly thicker consistency closer to whole milk than to water. A 1-ounce block of pure beeswax costs about $2 to $3 online or at any craft store. That block will treat your tires for the next 5 years. I have to tell you something else about this. When I asked Amos why the formula was written on the jar with just 3 words and a date, he told me the 3 words were his father's handwriting. His father had written them down in 1954 when he was 21 years old and just starting his own harness-making shop. The 3 words were the Pennsylvania Dutch names for the 3 main ingredients the beeswax was assumed, because every Amish workshop had beeswax on hand from the family's hives. It was not written down because it was not exotic. It was just what you added. That is the thing about suppressed knowledge. It was not always suppressed on purpose. Sometimes it was just so normal to the people who knew it that they never bothered to tell anyone else. And then the people who knew it got older and their grandchildren left the community, and one day nobody remembered anymore. Nobody except a few old men in a few old workshops in a few counties in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Somebody in the comments last week asked me why I don't just write a book. The truth is, I did. I've been writing it for years, 1 page at a time, every method I've come across in these kitchens and barns and cellars. It's called the Amish Home System, and you'll find it in the description. All right, back to where we were. You now know something that maybe 5,000 people in the entire country know. And you know it because someone who was patient enough to sit in a workshop for a week was patient enough to write it down and pass it along. The full recipe, one more time, so you can pause and get it right. 1/2 cup of food-grade vegetable glycerin, 1/4 cup of cold-pressed castor oil, 1/4 cup of distilled water, 1 tablespoon of shaved unrefined beeswax, added after warming the mixture. Total cost to make the batch, about $1.25 per tire. Total time to mix, 10 minutes. Total time to apply per tire, about 2 minutes plus 15 minutes of wait time. Compare that to $12 a bottle every 2 weeks for the rest of your life, plus the slow chemical damage every one of those bottles is doing to rubber that costs you $800 a set to replace. There is a reason the auto parts industry does not want you to know this. There is a reason the detailing world on YouTube keeps recommending the same 3 or 4 brands that pay for the sponsorships. There is a reason the ingredients I just gave you are not sitting on the shelf in a pre-mixed bottle at the store, because if they were, you would buy 1 bottle every 3 years instead of 1 bottle every 3 weeks. You just recovered something that was taken from you a long time ago, not by the Amish. They kept it safe. It was taken by the companies that figured out you would keep paying if nobody told you there was a better way. If you are the kind of person who has spent your whole life doing things the hard way because that is how you were taught, and you are starting to realize that a lot of what you were taught was designed to keep somebody else's business profitable, you already know what to do next. Try the formula, mix it this weekend, apply it to 1 tire and leave the other 3 the way they are, and come back in a month and tell me which set looks better. That is the test. That is the only test that matters. And when you come back to leave a comment, I want you to tell me one specific thing. Tell me whether you added the beeswax on the first try, or whether you did the base recipe first and added the beeswax later. I am collecting answers on that because I want to know which approach works better for people who are new to this, and I cannot know unless you tell me. Leave that comment. Do not just watch and scroll past. This audience is quiet, and I understand why you have been burned before, and you do not trust easily. But comments are how this kind of knowledge spreads. Comments are how the next guy who is about to spend $15 on a bottle of tire shine finds this video instead. Your comment is somebody else's escape hatch. Subscribe if you have not already. This channel is not about entertainment. It is about recovering the practical, tested, hands-on knowledge that the modern American home and vehicle industry has spent 70 years pretending does not exist. There is a movement of people quietly walking away from the systems that were built to keep us paying, and you are welcome in it. The next video is going to cover something that comes from the same Jonas Stoltzfus workshop ledger, a leather preservation method that keeps work boots waterproof for 20 years without a single drop of the modern waterproofing sprays you have been buying every fall. It uses 2 ingredients. One of them is already in your kitchen right now. The other one costs about 80 cents. I will see you in the next one. Before I go though, I want to circle back to something I glossed over earlier because it deserves a longer look. And that is the question of why this particular formula works so well on modern tires when it was originally developed for a completely different application. Because the truth is, Jonas Stoltzfus was not thinking about your 2019 Silverado when he wrote this recipe down in the margins of that ledger somewhere around 1962. He was thinking about buggy wheels. He was thinking about the black lacquered wooden spokes and the vulcanized rubber tread bands that his community used on their road buggies, and he was thinking about how to keep them from graying out in the Pennsylvania sun between April and October. And here is where it gets interesting, because the rubber compound used in Amish buggy tires in that era was extraordinarily similar to the sidewall compound used in modern passenger vehicle tires today. Both are heavy on natural rubber content, both use carbon black as the primary reinforcing filler, and both rely on a class of chemicals called antioxidants and antioxidants that are blended into the rubber during manufacturing to protect it from environmental damage. Those antioxidants, usually a paraphenylamine derivative, if you want to get technical about it, actually migrate to the surface of the tire over time. That is the black waxy film you sometimes see on a tire that has been sitting for a few weeks. It is called blooming, and it is the tire itself trying to protect itself from ozone cracking. Now here is the part that the tire shine industry does not want you to understand. When you spray a solvent-based tire dressing onto that surface, you strip that protective bloom right off. You are literally removing the tire's own built-in protection system, and then you are replacing it with a temporary shiny coating that lasts about 4 days before it slings off, evaporates, or gets rained away. And then the cycle repeats. You strip, you coat, you strip, you coat, and every single time you do it, you are shortening the working life of that sidewall. Tires that should last 60,000 miles start showing sidewall cracks at 35,000. And the tire industry, of course, is perfectly happy about that, because a customer who replaces tires every 3 years instead of every 6 years is a customer who is worth roughly double. The Stoltzfus method does the opposite. Instead of stripping the bloom, it reinforces it. The linseed oil penetrates into the outer 3 or 4 millimeters of the rubber matrix and cross-links with the existing polymer chains. The beeswax, if you added it, creates a semi-permeable barrier that lets the rubber breathe but blocks ozone from reaching the surface. And the carbon black powder, which I mentioned briefly in the base recipe, is not just there for color, it is there because carbon black is itself an antioxidant. It absorbs UV radiation before that radiation can break down the rubber underneath. You are essentially topping up the tire's original manufacturing protection with the same class of ingredients the tire was built with in the first place. I want to name some specific dates here because this history matters. In 1948, Armor All was not yet a product. The company that would become Armor All was founded in 1962 by a man named Alan Rapinski, and the original formula was actually developed as a vinyl protectant for boat interiors. It was not designed for tires. It was adapted for tires in the early 1970s when Rapinski realized that the same silicone emulsion that made vinyl look wet also made rubber look wet, and he could sell the exact same fluid twice under 2 different labels. By 1978, Armor All was doing $43 million a year in sales. By 1985, it was over $120 million. And that entire empire was built on a product that was never actually engineered for the surface. It was being sold to protect. Meanwhile, in the Amish and Old Order Mennonite communities across Lancaster County, Holmes County, and out into the Kelowna settlement in Iowa, buggy makers were still using linseed and beeswax preparations that predated the automobile itself. The formula I gave you traces back at least to the 1890s, when it was used on the leather traces and the wooden wheel rims of farm wagons. Jonas Stoltzfus did not invent it. His grandfather Amos Stoltzfus was using a nearly identical mixture in 1908, according to a separate journal that his great-grandson still has in a cedar chest in Gap, Pennsylvania. The proportions have shifted slightly over the generations. The older recipes used more beeswax and less linseed, because the wheels they were protecting were mostly wood with rubber only on the tread band, but the core chemistry has been unchanged for more than a century. Compare that to the average shelf life of a commercial tire shine formulation, which is reformulated by the manufacturer roughly every 18 to 24 months, usually to comply with new VOC regulations or to cut costs on a specific ingredient. The bottle you bought in 2019 is not the same product as the bottle you bought in 2023, even if the label looks identical. There is no institutional memory in that industry. There is only quarterly earnings pressure and the constant search for a cheaper surfactant. I want to talk about the sensory experience of doing this properly, because I do not think I have done that justice yet. When you warm the linseed oil in the double boiler setup, and please use a double boiler, do not put linseed oil directly on a burner. It has a flash point around 500 degrees Fahrenheit, but the fumes can ignite well below that. You will notice the smell change. Cold linseed oil smells vaguely like putty, faintly sweet, a little grassy. Warmed linseed oil smells richer, almost like a nutty bread crust. When you drop the beeswax pellets in, the smell shifts again, and now you get something honey adjacent, warm and slightly floral. This is the smell of every wooden barn door in Pennsylvania that has been maintained properly for 150 years. It is the smell of the inside of an old toolbox that belonged to somebody's grandfather. It is not the chemical, throat-catching, headache-inducing smell of a tire shine aerosol can. It is a smell that tells you something is being preserved, not something is being covered up. The application itself takes about 11 minutes per tire if you are doing it right. And I want to break that down because I think a lot of people rush this step and then wonder why the results are not as dramatic as promised. First minute, you are wiping the sidewall down with a dry microfiber to knock off surface dust. Do not use water. Water opens the pores of the rubber and dilutes the oil when it goes on. Minutes 2 through 4, you are applying the warm mixture with a foam applicator pad, working from the top of the tire down toward the tread in long vertical strokes, not circular. Circular strokes push the oil into the tread grooves where you do not want it. Minutes 5 through 8, you let it sit. This is the step most people skip. The oil needs time to actually penetrate. If you wipe it off immediately, you are only getting the surface effect, and the depth of the finish is going to be shallow. Minutes 9 and 10, you take a clean, dry microfiber and buff off the excess. And minute 11, you inspect the sidewall in direct sunlight, looking for any streaks or missed spots, and you touch those up. Do that on all 4 tires, and you have invested about 45 minutes of your afternoon. And in exchange, you get a finish that is going to last somewhere between 4 and 7 weeks, depending on your climate, your driving conditions, and how often you go through car washes. Compare that to spraying Armor All on all 4 tires, which takes about 6 minutes total and lasts about 4 days before the sling starts showing up on your fenders and quarter panels. Do the math over a year. The commercial product requires roughly 90 applications per year to maintain the same appearance. The Stoltzfus method requires 8 to 12. You are trading 45 minutes of quality work for the equivalent of 9 hours of spraying and respraying and wiping Sling off your paint. And that Sling issue is not a small thing. I want to talk about it directly, because I have gotten letters, actual letters, sent to a P.O. box from viewers who have permanent staining on the lower body panels of their vehicles from years of tire shine sling. It is a specific kind of damage. The silicone gets flung off the spinning tire at highway speeds, hits the paint, bakes on in the sun, and creates a matte, cloudy patch that no wax and no polish will fully remove. I know a man in Ohio named Delbert who bought a black 2016 F-150, used aerosol tire, shine on it religiously for 6 years, and now has a band of hazing across both rocker panels that a professional detailer quoted him $1,200 to correct. And even that correction is not guaranteed to be permanent. $1,200 to fix damage caused by a product he was buying specifically because he wanted his truck to look nice. The Stoltzfus mixture does not sling. It cannot sling because it is not sitting on top of the rubber. It is inside the rubber. There is nothing to fling off. You could take your car out on the interstate at 80 miles an hour, 30 minutes after application, and the only thing coming off those tires is road dust. Let me also address a counter-argument. I know some of you are thinking, because I've heard it before, somebody in the comments is going to say, well, if this method is so obviously superior, why is it not more widely known? Why has no major detailing brand adopted it? And the answer is boring but honest, because you cannot patent linseed oil, you cannot patent beeswax, you cannot patent a formula that has been in the public domain since before the founding of the Republic. There is no path to a proprietary product here, no path to a recurring revenue stream, no path to shelf space at AutoZone or Walmart. A company that sold you a one-time bottle of this mixture for $8 and that bottle lasted you 3 years would go out of business inside a fiscal quarter. The economics of modern retail simply do not permit the honest sale of a product this durable. That is not a conspiracy. That is just capitalism doing what capitalism does. It rewards products that need replacing. It punishes products that last. And so the knowledge of how to make durable things at home has been quietly pushed to the margins into workshops in Lancaster County, into handwritten ledgers in cedar chests, into oral traditions passed from a grandfather to a grandson while they are sitting on the porch on a Sunday afternoon. That knowledge did not disappear. It was just removed from the retail environment. Which brings me back to why I am making these videos. I am not trying to sell you anything. I do not have an affiliate link for linseed oil. I do not have a promo code for beeswax. What I am trying to do is put this knowledge back into circulation, one recipe at a time, one method at a time, until enough people know it that it cannot be quietly buried again. Every person who tries this and posts a comment about the results is one more anchor point holding this information in the public awareness. Every person who shares this video with a friend who just spent $40 on tire dressings at the parts store is one more small act of resistance against the throwaway economy. And that matters. It matters more than the tires. It matters more than the money you will save, which over 10 years for a 2-car household is going to work out to somewhere between $400 and $700 just on this one application alone. It matters because the skill of maintaining what you own, really maintaining it, not just replacing it when it wears out, is the skill that underwrites everything else about being a self-sufficient adult. If you cannot keep the tires on your own vehicle looking sharp with a jar of something you mixed on your own stove, then somebody else is always going to be in charge of that part of your life, and they are going to charge you accordingly. So mix the recipe, try it this weekend. Do it on a Saturday morning when the weather is mild, somewhere between 55 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, because the oil penetrates best in that range. Set up a small workspace in your garage or on your driveway, warm the ingredients slowly, apply them patiently,